Well, it's time to start using AXIOS. What is the purpose of having an API call to help us design the website more efficiently, or to allow us to build a more streamlined and easier to manage code for our React.js server? Now it's the time to start configuring it. So what I'm thinking that we should do, let's grab our Web3 website, our NFT mint portal. Let's grab information from Etherscan and display that on our website. Let's code an API call to retrieve the token balance. And when we refer to the token balance in the NFT smart contract, we're referring to the amount of NFTs that were minted by our buyers, because we want to provide that information to the buyer. We want people that once they log into the website, they know how many NFTs are still available on the smart contract. So we have two options of doing it. One, you can code in JavaScript function to retrieve that information straight from the smart contract. And that works. That's one way of doing it, but that is a little bit more complex way to grab information. Why not leverage an API call to retrieve that information from someone else or another entity database, in this case from Etherscan? It's the block explorer for Ethereum. They already have all the information listed on their website. The only thing we need to do is, through an API call, grab that information and throw it on our site. It's an easier way to retrieve the information we want to retrieve, so we can show the end users how many tokens are left on the smart contract. With that said, let's jump right in, and we're going to be configuring AXIOS, and we're going to grab the token supply of the NFT smart contract that we previously built for our Web3 application. All right, let's start. All right, let me move this screen to the side, and okay, awesome. So if you remember on the last video, what we did, let me go real quick. I believe we grabbed the API key. Remember, just a refresh. The API key, you need to retrieve that key from Etherscan's website, or in this case, from an Etherscan user account. So the moment you create your user account in Etherscan, you can request an API key, and you can use that key to perform API calls. So what we want to do now, we want to use that API key to authenticate into the Etherscan API interface and perform our call. We also mentioned that there is a web HTTPS, and I can just have a quick refresher. Let me go here. There is an HTTPS endpoint URL in which the API call gets directed to. On our JavaScript code, we need to configure a constant that stores the entire endpoint along with all the options that we want to tell the API to look for. Because remember, in the last video, if you're still a little bit unfamiliar regarding API, I suggest you see the previous video, which I go into details with the module itself. You know, we do the API call, but then we need to specify what module inside the API call are we talking to. And in this case, we want to talk to the token module because we want to get the balance from the tokens. All that information, it's in the Etherscan docs for the API module, right? So now that we know all that, let's grab the endpoint that we are going to send our API call and retrieve the information that we need. In this case, because our smart contract is deployed in the Wrinkleby testnet, we want to grab this URL and store it and configure a constant that will store that particular value. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me just copy. I'm going to copy the link. Now let's go to our Visual Studio Code. Let's go to our application, and let's build another constant called, let's call the endpoint, because we know that's the API endpoint, right? And let me open here, and I am going to paste the endpoint address. This is basically attached to the call. So once we call AXIOS, it's going to look for the endpoint, which it's actually pointing to the HTTPS URL, right? So this is the endpoint. Also, we want to make sure that there's no there's not a subdirectory inside this endpoint that we need to also add on the endpoint, which I believe is API. So it's /API, but I want to make sure. I'm just going to click it, and they already have some sort of test that you can run. I think it's too small, but I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And you can see here, you can just click this, and I already see here. So you can see there is a an API, and then after that it goes /API. So this is literally a way to test it. So let me click here, and if you can see on the top in my URL, you see that it's /API. This is also part of the endpoint address, so you got to make sure that you add that on the endpoint itself. After that, all this information will be attached to the call, so then we get the information. Once it hits that info, we get the information back. Something very cool that I want to show you here. All those values that we see here on the screen are values that we can call on an API query through an API call. So if let's say I want to grab the gas price, I can actually grab this value and store it in React.js as a variable, and then I can show this value on our website. That's very cool. So I can see, I can show live data pulled from Etherscan onto our website regarding anything. So how do I know that? I get my URL, and then inside the URL, I am looking for a particular value, right? So if I want to get, this particular value, I want to store this output into a variable so then I can show this particular value in React. I just need to know what the name of that value is, right? And then I use that on my API call to get that information. It's awesome, and you're going to see this live now. So we got that. All right, let's go to our React. So we know the React app is currently, we left it this way. Everything is working. Now we have this. Now we know that this ends in API. So we need to make sure that API is at the end, which it is. Okay, so we got that so far. Now we need to build inside the class. We basically build an array that will allow us to grab whatever output we get from the API and throw it dynamically onto a value that we can then call on React.js. Again, we'll need a whole video just to discuss class in JavaScript. I'm just gonna go right away and configure it so you can see it, okay? Because right now, React.js, the HTML rendering, it's done under a function. We need to nest this particular function in React.js into the class. How do I do that? I can convert this to be a class. A class has multiple functions. Right now it's a single function to render the site. Now I can actually get multiple functions inside the same class. And that way I can execute multiple things, because now I have to do an API call before I render the website, because I need to know the value before I can populate the website and show the information to the end user, which involves having to do that instruction before opening the website, right? So once you go to the site, hit enter, it goes over all that, and then it finds the information regarding Axios, does the API call, grabs the value, and then throws that in the output once it renders HTML. So we have to provide that beforehand, so then it knows what needs to be populated on the site itself, right? Okay, so it's gonna make a lot more sense once we configure it. So with that said, I have to get rid of this function because I am going to nest multiple functions onto one. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to delete this, right? The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to build a class. And for to make the video faster, I have everything pre-scripted. I'm just going to copy and paste because there's a lot of lines, and that makes the video a little bit shorter. I don't want to continue typing. So what we got to do first, we got to create a class. So this is how you do it. You invoke class. Remember the function name was app. Now we're just gonna make the class name app because we're going to add that function inside of it. So let's just make the class name app. Okay. Now we want to build that array function to grab that information from the API call using Axios by creating the constructor. So the constructor allows me to group all that array of values. It's basically a way to dynamically create multiple values with only a single variable. So I can, this is commonly used for loops, and loops in JavaScript and other programming languages. It literally is a way for me to dynamically create a variable that can be constantly updated, okay? And we're gonna open to be a super constructor. This is how you do it. And again, this is full-blown JavaScript. I'm not gonna go into it because it's gonna take a whole video just to do this, just to explain this, okay? Okay, so basically it's asking this state, you know, it's saying this is what we're calling, state it's what we're getting. We are calling the API, this is the function, this is the output, right? In this case, I am gonna call balance, that's my my function for API. So I basically am gonna create that function called balance. Balance, it's gonna be stored in whatever Axios spits out to us, right? It retrieves from the call. And so basically that's what it means. That this is dynamic. Whatever output you get from that call, you're just gonna throw it there, okay? Awesome. Now we need to mount Axios because we need to call Axios and then invoke that endpoint with the whole path that will tell us where to look for that information. So Axios knows how to get the info, okay? So with that said, I'm going to right away grab this and I'm going to explain what each item is all about. So after that, I am going to grab this here. I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to show you real quick what it means. Okay, so I just mounted an async function. I am going to mount Axios this way. Why? Because I want to store whatever output I get from the API call. And this is how you do an API call using Axios. This is the fun part. Axios.get. Remember on the last video, we have get, we got pull, we got push, we got other functions that we can call or actions in API. In this case, we're using Axios to do a get API call, okay? What are we actually retrieving from the API call? Sorry, what are we actually calling? What API are we actually going to reach? We're going to reach endpoint. What is endpoint? Let's go up. Endpoint will be the address of the API endpoint for Etherscan. In this case, it's the wrinkle by because it's the testnet. It's where we have our smart contract. Okay. What else? Plus. So basically, I am saying Axios, hey, do me an API get call to the endpoint address, which we configure and store in the variable called endpoint, plus append all this in text. So all the information. What is actually happening is literally it's building the endpoint address, HTTPS, the whole Etherscan address, /API, and then it's going to append this at the end. So this is exactly what we manually did not long ago through Etherscan, so we can see all the output. This is literally doing it as a variable, okay? What are we calling? Which module? We're calling the module stats. That's the module that allows us to get output of the quantity of tokens that were minted on the smart contract. And you can find this information from the API documentation. You can see what module will get the value that you're looking for. So first we have to invoke the module stats. Then we call the action equals token supply. So basically in Etherscan there's an action. What is the action? Token supply. Token supply means that get me the token supply from the module stat. However, I still need to tell Etherscan through the API call, when I do my get call, what is the contract address? And they are expecting contract address equals address. Remember this value? This is our variable, our constant, that we configured previously to do the Web3 call to the blockchain. We're basically calling the Ethereum smart contract, storing it in an address constant, which then gets appended here into the URL. Address, if I hover over address, you can see what's the value. It's the actual smart contract address. Awesome. And this is the API key. Why? Because it's an authenticated API request. It needs to be authenticated in order for us to get that information. So you first have to build that account, like I mentioned, and create an API key. Also, we have to make sure, yes, We have an API key stored inside this constant. So we know that it's going to be able to call that HTTPS request using the endpoint that we store, and it's going to append all this information with the right value, obviously, of this and the right value of this, and do the get. Once it performs that get, it's going to store the output into Etherscan constant. So what we need to do under Etherscan, that's the constant name. Inside of that constant is where we have the value that we pulled using that we got from the API call. Okay. What we need to do now, we need to let that result be stored in the balance. So we need to tell whatever you got from the Etherscan API call, which is basically invoking Axios and it's getting all that HTTPS request. Whatever you get there, let's throw it inside the balance array here. Okay. So how do we do this? We create a let. Basically telling, hey, I want to make sure that you grab whatever inside Etherscan gets stored. Let's grab that result, which equals Etherscan.data. Etherscan is the action to do the API call. We label this to be Etherscan. You can label this anything you want. But in our case, in the demonstration, I label it Etherscan. Equals await. What am I awaiting? I am awaiting for Axios to do the get, to get the to get the HTTPS request, to get this information from the module stat pointing to the smart contract that we created. Okay. Once you get that output, I want then to grab the particular value that you got from the Etherscan call. Etherscan.data. This is what we need. Now this, meaning Etherscan, give me set state, remember this is the call, this is the output or the value. This balance is the result of this. In this case, we have balance, we got result, right? So what's going to happen is whatever you get from here, you want to throw it in the result, and then it's going to be appended to the balance. Why we do this? We do this because this could be dynamic. In this case, it's not dynamic it's dynamic. If someone goes to the site and mints a token, the value updates, right? So that's why we configure it this way, because we can actually do an array call or like arrayed output. We can change that value because it can be dynamic, okay? So balance equals, balance, it's equal to result. What we need to call in HTML is balance, and it's going to show the value. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead real quick. Now, once we have that and we get that information, we need to render the output, meaning that please render all this information so that we can return the value in HTML. How do you do this? Very simple. You want to open a render function or a render action, right? So we want to open a render action of what? We want to store the constant balance from whatever state you got here, okay? So in this case, balance, it's whatever the result is. The result is whatever Etherscan.data API call got. Constant balance, balance equals this state, okay? Now I have a fully working variable that I can use in HTML to get the output that we're looking for. In this case, whatever the API call got from Etherscan. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's continue. I'm just going to do it for demonstration here, but then we can do it. You can prettify the whole thing. But for now, what I'm going to do, I am going to call the variable here, or the output, in this case will be balance, right? And basically what it's doing is grabbing whatever you got from here, right, from the balance, and showing it as text on our site, okay? Awesome. What is left? We are left to, and you can see this turned on. It was grayed out, but now it turned on because now it's able to call it. It's able to see that there's a variable declare in the render action, okay? So what we need to do now, we just need to close this. We're going to close this way. And we have to close the full class before we can export the value. And there you go. All errors are gone. So that's very cool. That's good. Everything looks great. One thing that we're missing. This is not going to work unless you call the module. You need to import Axios onto React.js. The same goes when you want React.js to render everything that we just configured here. Right now it's not being called. How do you do it? Very simple. Go all the way to the import section, which is basically at the top. I'm just going to scroll this real quick. Right? And this is what we're doing. We're literally importing Axios from Axios, which is the module that we install. Remember, we installed Axios on the last video. We make sure that it's imported onto the app. We import from React. We want to grab component because we need to use that component from React to process this class that we just configured, right? So we configured this entire class, and this is where it's going to know what to do with all this information, okay? So let me go ahead now and save the config and cross fingers. All right, let's do it. Let's save the config. Let's go back and awesome. Yes, it does work. How do we know that? This is the amount of NFTs that were already sold on the smart contract. You want to make sure that that's the case. Let's go to the contract. By the way, let me go back. And you know what? This is on wrinkle buy. So what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do, I want to grab the name, the address of the smart contract. Boom. Let me copy the address of the smart contract. Let's go to Etherscan, Etherscan.io, and we want to get to wrinkle buy. And we want to paste that address of the smart contract. And we want to get to the token. There you go. 3. That's cool. That is cool. Alrighty. How do we know that this, that our entire path was pointing to this value? The API documentation. Each vendor will have their own API structure. You just have to read the documents and get to it. So this is how I got that information, because I am pointing to the smart contract address and doing the API call. So that's very simple. Okay. So to finalize, I am going to do something very cool. I want to take that out of here, right? And I want to say right now, I am going to type, just do a H2, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to paste the balance inside. I'm going to say tokens minted so far, and then balance. So whatever output from balance, it's just going to append that to this particular sentence, and it should be displayed on the website. So I'm going to save it, and let's go back. Ah, you like that? You like that? So we can go creative. We can say, /1,000 total, supply, and then just here, and let's go back. You like that, huh? There you go. So you can say, you can tell your end users, this is the amount of tokens that are minted so far from the smart contract. If I mint another one, it's just going to increase automatically because I am doing a dynamic variable and I'm storing this. So every time that there is a new NFT minted, I can just refresh and this should update with whatever information Etherscan got. You see, that was very simple. Difference by doing this, it's obviously I coded this in literally 5 minutes. If you don't understand JavaScript that much, it's going to be a little bit hard for you to build all this. I am making this for you to get familiar with JavaScript, get familiar with API calls. I am going to share the entire script on the link below in this video, so then you can practice. Go to Etherscan, grab information from any API call and test it yourself. You don't. I just did this as an example, but you can go into the API documentation and grab any information and show it on screen. That's awesome, right? So if I want to grab this and throw it, so let me show the screen one more time. If I want to grab this information and show it inside the portal, I got to make sure that this config in HTML, it's inside the form. It's not outside. Right now it's outside, right? So I'm just gonna cut it and I'm gonna throw it below this particular sentence. Okay, I'm gonna save it and let's see how that looks. Alrighty. Alright, awesome. So I hope you liked the video. You saw it, very simple. We did our first API call. On the next video, we're gonna do some more magic with API. I am thinking that we should be able to list this a little bit more clean format. We're gonna do some graphical enhancements or improvement, and we're gonna keep exploring what we can do with API, which is very powerful. So that's it for now. I'm gonna wrap it up. I hope you liked this video, and please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.